There's no need to shout. There's no requirement to plead. And you absolutely do not have to justify yourself endlessly to someone committed to devaluing your words. When you're facing a person who thrives on control, every single phrase you utter becomes a weapon for them. Each rationalization, each apology, each plea to be seen is a doorway you're unknowingly propping open for them to trample you. That all stops right now. You don't conquer a manipulator with more noise. You defeat them with your truth, a quiet, centered, unbreakable truth. And there are just a handful of words that, when spoken with pure conviction, instantly shift the balance of power. It's not because they magically improve. They won't. It's because you refuse to perform the character they assigned you. Say this: I recognize this game. I will not participate. We are done here. That's all. That one statement is a reflection. It shows them you are fully aware. It signals that you are no longer a target for manipulation, for control, for baiting, or for being torn down. You are done auditioning for a role from someone who is determined to misunderstand you. And this is the starting point of your strength, when their approval is no longer required for you to hold your ground. Because a manipulator doesn't fear the loss of you, they fear the loss of their hold on you. And when you cease to react, when you cease to defend, when you cease to feed their hunger for control, they begin to unravel. Stillness and composure are deeply unsettling to a manipulator, because it means their access to the part of you they preyed upon is gone. So, you quit explaining, you quit auditioning, you quit apologizing for having standards, you quit trying to rescue them or waiting for them to have a breakthrough. You don't debate, you don't beg, you stand firm and you state, I am not available for disrespect. This stops now. You offer them no material to argue against. You leave no manipulative trails for them to follow. You give them nothing but clarity, and then you exit. Maybe not with your body at first, but with your mind, your emotions, your spirit. You unhook. You let them experience the void left by your energy, your investment, your acceptance. And that quiet will speak with more volume than 1,000 speeches ever could. You don't have to reflect their turmoil. You only have to embody the peace they can't shatter. Say those words one time. Say them like your soul means it. And then stop appearing in places where your worth is up for debate. This isn't a power you need to go find. It's the power that's been inside you all along. It's time to use it. When confronting a manipulator, the common reflex is to talk louder, to rush to self-defense, or to lay out one's feelings, hoping for a moment of connection. But here's the tough reality. Manipulators don't seek connection. They seek command. Every debate, every charged response, every word you add to the blaze only intensifies their feeling of power. The more you engage them with logic, the further they drag you onto their turf, forcing you to play by their dishonest rules. And their games are never fair. This is precisely why stillness and a composed spirit are your most powerful assets. Not because they render you passive, but because they make you psychologically unreachable. That quiet is not an admission of defeat. It is a tactical retreat. It's a refusal to supply the emotional storm they feed on. Manipulators need drama. It's what makes them feel significant. When you become still, truly still, and maintain emotional neutrality, it throws them off balance. It cuts off their access to your feelings. For a person who thrives on control, that's intolerable. They have to poke and provoke to get a reaction. When you hold your composure, when your voice is even and your vibe is neutral, it sends back a message they can't distort, that you are in charge of yourself. Composure in the teeth of provocation is evidence of profound inner fortitude. It shows you've exited the hurricane and declined the invitation to waltz with toxicity. You are no longer required to shout to be acknowledged or to prove yourself to someone dedicated to missing the point. You come to understand that stillness itself is a fortress wall. It declares, I will not engage in this pattern. I will not allow your chaos to destabilize my peace. And that truth lands with more force than any clever retort. It's not about ignoring what's happening or faking that everything is fine. It's about owning your response. It's about a conscious refusal to be dragged into psychological combat. When you cease reacting, you deprive the manipulator of what they hunt for: your vitality, your focus, your emotional exposure. That disengagement isn't punishment. It's self-preservation. It's wisdom. It's the point where you value your own tranquility more than winning their approval. Because what they truly desire is not to win a single argument. They desire to win ownership of your emotional state. When you remain composed and still, you make that an impossible goal. Manipulators flourish in fog. They bend ambiguous phrasing, exploit emotionally charged talks, and treat your boundaries like flexible suggestions rather than solid lines. For this reason, when you are managing someone who feeds on confusion and power, your most formidable tool is clean and direct communication. This is not about becoming hostile or combative. It's about being relentlessly clear, exact, and steady. When your language is sharp and firm, it provides no space for misinterpretation. And that's what neutralizes manipulation before it even starts. Employing direct language involves shedding the justifications, the softening phrases, and the long-winded backstories. You stop communicating with, "I kind of feel like maybe you're not respecting me," and you start stating, "Your comment was disrespectful, and I won't allow it again." There's zero ambiguity there. You aren't creating an opening for them to debate your emotions or warp your point. You're declaring a fact and signaling a clear consequence. People who thrive on control detest that. They seek out loopholes. They need emotional ambiguity. They need you to speak in riddles so they can twist it back on you. Directness robs them of that ability. When you state things such as, "I am not open to being manipulated," or "This dialogue is not productive, I'm stepping away now," you are not requesting their permission or consensus. You are drawing a definitive line and demonstrating that you are no longer a player in their game. This type of communication forces them to meet you on solid ground, or you leave. And when your manner is calm, but your words are precise, it's like shattering a framework they have relied on for years. You are no longer a person they can easily confuse or bait. It also transforms you from the inside. Speaking with clarity reinforces your sense of self. You stop making yourself small. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You begin to honor your intuition and own your truth without diluting it for anyone else's comfort. That internal coherence builds external resilience. You articulate what you intend, you stand by your words, and you act on them without hesitation. People who thrive on control can feel when someone recognizes their own value. They will either intensify their efforts to control you, or they will vanish. The final result isn't as important as your commitment to communicate with precision, confidence, and unwavering conviction. When you are caught up with a manipulator, a deeply harmful habit you adopt is the relentless need to give explanations. You believe that if you just phrase it perfectly, if you offer sufficient backstory, if you defend your choices with enough detail, they will have a breakthrough and finally see you. But their goal is not to see you, their goal is to own the story. Manipulators take your explanations and use them to contort your message, find flaws in your logic, and turn the fault back around on you. Each instance you attempt to justify yourself, you are handing them fresh material to use against you. The instant you cease explaining is the instant you cease surrendering your power. You are not a defendant in a courtroom. You are not obligated to give them a complete analysis of your emotions, choices, or limits. When you state your "no," that is a complete sentence. When you declare that you will not accept a behavior, that is sufficient. You are not required to persuade them. You are not required to get them to agree. Expecting validation from a person who gains from your self-doubt is a game you will never win. Manipulators want you to continue explaining because it keeps you uncertain and keeps them in a position of power. Defending your character to someone who has already painted you as the antagonist is pointless. They aren't listening to understand you. They are listening to discover a vulnerability, an inconsistency, a path to gaslight you into submission. They want you in a constant state of uncertainty so they can maintain their superior position. When you stop defending, you exit that entire destructive cycle. You become psychologically untouchable, not because you won them over, but because you have determined your reality is valid without their sign-off. They intentionally withhold validation. That's how they keep you hooked, constantly seeking it. That's the mechanism of control. The more you depend on them for acknowledgement, the more authority they have over your sense of self. This loop keeps you trapped, diminished, and tethered to the very individual who inflicts the harm. When you decide to validate yourself, to trust your own truth without their stamp of approval, you reclaim your power in the most essential way. You don't need to be comprehended by someone who insists on seeing you through a distorted lens. You don't need to justify your own suffering to the one who is its source. You don't need to defend your own limits to the one who repeatedly violates them. You simply refuse to participate in that draining power struggle, and in that refusal, you get back your own peace and your self-respect. Your limits are not pleas, they are your personal laws. And when you establish them with a manipulator, the most vital truth to grasp is this: guilt has no place here. Manipulators will challenge your boundaries, provoke your reactions, and play on your feelings to make you doubt your own protective lines. They will try to make you feel inconsiderate, distant, or cruel for simply guarding your well-being. This is their strategy. If they can make you feel guilty, they can make you back down. And the moment you back down, the boundary evaporates. You cannot come to terms with someone who profits from your distress. When you declare a limit and then feel that pull to apologize or rationalize, stop and consider who you are attempting to soothe: yourself, or the one who continues to disrespect your space. Setting limits is not about managing another person's behavior. It is about managing your own decisions, your own territory, and your own emotional state. And if another person is angered by your boundary, that's not a signal that your limit is wrong. It is often a signal that it is necessary and effective. A manipulator will consistently frame your boundary as an act of hostility. They might label you as overly dramatic, hypersensitive, harsh, or demanding. They will turn your own compassion, your need for harmony, and your aversion to confrontation into weapons to make you doubt your reality. But here is the core truth. If you are safeguarding your sanity, your schedule, your energy, or your emotional health, you are not inflicting harm. You are valuing yourself, and that act never requires an apology. Boundaries that are free from guilt are the very thing that tells a manipulator the old rules are gone. You are no longer emotionally accessible for their manipulations. You are no longer justifying your needs or softening your position just to sidestep a conflict. You are done collapsing so they can remain comfortable while you remain fractured. When your no is spoken, it's a final answer. When you say, "Stop, the behavior must cease," you are not being harsh. You are being exceptionally clear. And clarity is poison to someone who flourishes in a state of confusion. Guilt is the chain that binds people to toxic dynamics. You create a limit, they resist, you feel awful, and instantly you are back at the start, depleted, disrespected, and spiritually exhausted. But when you extract guilt from this process, you liberate yourself. You understand that your boundary does not need to be understood by them to be respected. It does not need their endorsement. It only needs you to support it completely, knowing that protecting your own peace will always disturb those who profited from its absence. Manipulators are not afraid of your rage. They aren't scared of your arguments, your tears, or your pleading. The reality is, they consume it. It validates their importance, confirming they still command your emotional state. What truly unnerves them is your disengagement, your total emotional unhooking, your peaceful withdrawal, your steadfast refusal to take the bait of their manufactured chaos. Disengagement is the turning point when you cease to react, cease to defend, and cease to look to them for approval. It's the moment they grasp they can no longer get a rise out of you. can no longer use guilt or flattery to sway you, and can no longer depend on your goodwill to shield them from the outcomes of their actions. For a manipulator, your detachment is not simply emotional space, it's a complete loss of power. It shatters the fantasy that they hold sway over your feelings. As long as you give them a reaction, they feel central to your world. The instant you fall silent and still, they are denied the very emotional fuel they require. Your quietness will become more deafening than any argument. Your tranquility becomes their worst fear, because it proves you have stepped beyond the theater of drama and taken back your own authority. They can no longer direct your responses or lure you into their psychological traps. You have identified the toxic pattern, you've called it out, and you are finished performing your part in it. This unhooking isn't a sign of being cold, it's a sign of clarity. It signals you have arrived at a point where your own serenity is more valuable than their acceptance. You're no longer clinging to the hope they will change, waiting for an apology, or trying to force them to see your point of view. You see the dynamic for exactly what it is, and you withdraw your emotional stake in it. That isn't indifference. It is wisdom. It is maturity. It's the result of when you quit idealizing who they could be and start honoring the reality of their consistent behavior. The manipulator may lash out when they sense you pulling away. They might resort to love, bombing, threats, guilt trips, or playing the martyr. But none of these tactics land once you've truly disengaged. Because disengagement means you are no longer connected to their cycle of harm. You no longer respond to their compliments or their critiques. You are simply a witness from a safe distance, without any impulse to fix, justify, or prove a single thing. You have separated your self-worth from their assessment. And that is what frightens them beyond anything else. They cannot bear being made irrelevant. And your detachment achieves exactly that. It communicates to them that the show is over, not because of a victory on your part, but because you've simply walked off the stage. You have reclaimed your authority, not with aggression, but through your resolute refusal to be a part of the dysfunction they depend on. There's a moment of awakening when you quit looking for power externally and begin to see that it's been a part of you this whole time. Manipulators are experts at making you forget this fact. They wear down your certainty, your clarity, and your voice until you buy into the lie that you need them to be validated, to be recognized, to be whole. But the real story is this: the power you've been hoping for isn't something you need to go find, ask for, or build from scratch. It's something you already possess. It exists in your capacity to say no. It exists in your capacity to leave. It exists in your capacity to stop rationalizing and start moving. All the times you accepted disrespect, all the times you chose silence to avoid a fight, all the times you offered yet another chance when they had already revealed their true nature. You weren't powerless. You were just disconnected from your own strength. And the moment you decide to plug back into it, the entire landscape shifts. Not because of a change in them, but because you no longer require it. You no longer require their sign off to trust your own intuition. You no longer require their endorsement to know your own value. You no longer require their apology to start your own healing journey. You currently have the strength to shatter the pattern, the strength to block all contact, the strength to say, "This is not acceptable to me," the strength to guard your serenity even when it makes them furious, the strength to turn your back on the person who made you question your own mind, and never look in their direction again. You don't need to hold off until you're completely confident. Power is not about feeling fearless. It's about making a choice. It's about deciding to honor your own reality, even if you're trembling, even if your voice is unsteady, even if they paint you as the villain for finally making yourself a priority. The manipulator will work to label you as unstable, too sensitive, too much, or irrational. But the thing they truly dread is you discovering that you are entirely sufficient just as you are, that you don't need to diminish yourself, perform for them, or endure abuse to be worthy of love. When you take back that knowledge, when you stand fully in your own authority, their influence breaks. Not because your fight became stronger, but because you at last revoked their license to determine your value. The transformation happens when you stop wondering, will they ever see? And start asking, why do I continue to offer my energy to someone who refuses to value me? That is the second your power floods back. Not with a bang or a fight, but with the quiet conviction that you have always held the key to your own cage.